Good morning, everybody. This is Dennis Stedman. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll give an extra minute for everybody to jump on, and then we'll get started. Good morning, good day. Hope you're all doing well. All right, everyone. Well, good day to everybody. Welcome to our webinar on food safety and public health matters. I am Dennis Stedman, Manager of New Hire Training for the Institutional Division of Ecolab. I'm joined by fellow Institutional Training Manager, Larry Vinson. Larry, will you please say hello?
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Larry. Our purpose for today's call is to discuss your warewashing program regarding food safety and public health. The process will be for us to take the next 60 minutes or so to supply some valuable information about your program, highlighting best practices and procedures. We will have a Q&A session at the end to capture any questions that you may have, but feel free to type them in as we go. The payoff for today's webinar is to maximize your operations procedures to increase your program's efficiency and effectiveness, especially in regard to food safety and public health. Hopefully that sounds good to you. We try to put ourselves in your shoes today and consider some of the questions that you might be asking yourselves, such as, what can I do to keep my operation optimized and efficient? How can I keep guests highly confident during and after COVID-19? How can I help my employees feel safe and focused? Is it safe to use reusable ware in my dish machine? We know you might have more questions along the way. Like we said, we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end of this session, but please feel free to type in your questions as well. We will do our best to capture those questions along the way. We'll be spending the bulk of our time today talking about how to keep customers highly satisfied, including strategies for dealing with COVID-19, as well as the best practices in maintaining your dish machine operation. Before we begin, we'd like to share some information and credentials about our department. Our department is comprised of roughly 30 people. Half of the department is devoted to operations, logistics, and content development. We handle everything from new hire training, leadership training, continuing education for tenured associates, and projects brought to us by our Ecolab business partners. To give you a quick idea of our scope of our reach, in 2019, we facilitated 122 new hire classes and 57 continuing education classes in the field. We were able to train 758 new hire associates and 756 tenured field associates. These tenured field associates are part of our almost 4,000 strong force of field personnel that help our customers every day with things like training, industry expertise, and preventative maintenance. We work with all of our associates to deliver the value our customers expect from Ecolab. So along with that, we know that there's a perception of cleanliness that affects your reputation. The perception of your ware by your customers is extremely important. It is also important to recognize and celebrate that the work your staff is doing in your operation. Their work helps prevent the spread of illnesses and protects the quality of your reputation. As we cover some of the best practices and procedures for your operation today, we will add any COVID-19 call-outs for areas where we know you might have some concerns about how to help control the coronavirus. And we know that this may be on the top of your mind these days. Obviously, the last several months have been unprecedented for the world, our country, and for the food service industry at large. How your staff handles the ware and themselves in your facility these days is more important than ever, and we get that. So let's just spend a moment to talk about how coronavirus spreads and how that affects your food safety and public health. The virus may be airborne for up to 3 hours from droplets from an infectious person. This is considered the main form of transmission of the virus. Generally on hard surfaces like stainless steel or plastic, the virus may live for 2 to 3 days and less on cardboard. It's important to keep in mind that public health authorities do not believe that transmission via surfaces is a significant way of spread of COVID-19. Because of this, the CDC recommends the standard washing and sanitizing of food contact surfaces and ware in your dish machine as a safe practice to combat the spread of coronavirus. Currently, there is also no evidence that COVID-19 is transmitted to humans through food. So standard food safety practices are encouraged, such as beginning with avoiding direct unprotected contact with live animals and surfaces in contact with live animals, avoid consuming raw or undercooked animals or sick animals, avoid cross-contamination by properly handling raw meat, milk, or other animal materials, and properly clean and sanitize food contact surfaces, including hands and utensils. So in summary, continue to follow standard food safety practices, and as a reminder, continue to enforce proper employee guidelines. So follow these practices or guidelines as important preventative measures to protect your staff and customers. These preventative measures may help prevent an outbreak of COVID-19 as well as other illnesses. So do things such as monitor news and advice from public health agencies, implement good infection prevention practices, communicate with and monitor employees. And if you would like more industry-specific information on COVID-19 and the best practices, visit ecolab.com/coronavirus, and we'll share this link at the end of our call as well. As we walk you through some of the processes around keeping your operation clean, safe, efficient, and effective, we will keep avoiding the spread of foodborne illness and the coronavirus in mind. But Larry, for now, take it away and let's talk about the flow of wear.
Absolutely, Dennis. Thanks for you. Understanding the flow of wear in your operation is critical to the perception of cleanliness and quality by your customers. There are 10 steps, and they are bussing, transport, hand scraping and sorting, pre-soak, racking, pre-scrapping, washing the wares, unload and drying, storing, and silver storage. The flow of the wear through your operation may be obvious, but each step is equally important. As we said, the first step is bussing. Here are some of the questions to consider in the bussing stage. Is your staff designated? Does your staff have designated bus tubs or carts? Are they stacking plates and glasses carefully to prevent expensive breakage? Are they getting the ware back to the kitchen in a timely manner for easier cleaning? For COVID-19 concerns, are they using gloves and spraying down surfaces and areas with appropriate cleaners and/or sanitizers? Are they using or required to wear a mask at work? We recommend checking with your local authority for the proper guidance and regulations. Wearing a mask might be seen as a good precautionary practice. Once the bussing stage is complete, you're going to want to get the ware transported back to the kitchen. Transporting is a key stage of the flow. It is an area where you want to eliminate expensive and dangerous breakage. You can help by training your staff not to overload bus tubs. Not only will overloading the bus tubs properly prevent breakage, but it can also prevent injuries such as cuts, strains, and sprains. Breakage can cause the possibility of adding physical contaminants into the food prep process. Time is an important factor during the bussing. The longer the wear is, the harder it is to clean. So transporting dirty ware back to the dish machine area is key. This would also be a good place to clean and sanitize your carts and bus tubs before returning them to service. Keep in mind that there's a difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, as we'll see in just a moment. But getting your ware clean first is an important step in making sure your ware can be properly sanitized. Let's take a quick look at the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. Cleaning refers to the physical removal of soil and germs by washing or wiping to lift dirt off the surfaces. Cleaning alone does not destroy microorganisms. Sanitizing, there are actually two kinds of sanitizing: non-food contact and food contact. Sanitizing reduces the number of bacteria in the environment significantly. After sanitizing a food contact surface, it is ready to use and does not need to be rinsed with water. The CDC recommends using the normal sanitation procedures in your operation during COVID-19, including using an EPA-registered sanitizer to wipe down the surface areas and using an EPA-registered chlorine sanitizer in your dish machine if it is a chemical sanitizing dish machine. Disinfecting actually destroys or irreversibly inactivates bacteria and viruses. Disinfection is only recommended in areas of high risk, even during the COVID-19 outbreak. As you think about food safety with transporting, you might want to consider if you have the right tools. Beyond bus gloves and hand carts, there are simple tools that can help with overall cleanliness of your operation, as well as the perception of your operation by your guests. Keeping gloves and sanitizer pails with sanitizer in multiple stations around your operation can help keep your food safety standards high, but they will be especially important in the busing, transporting, hand scraping and sorting, and pre-scraping stages. Wearing gloves will help keep your employees safe and prevent the spread of germs. Having the proper cleaning chemicals and tools will help prevent the spread of illness. Once you get your ware transported and bussed into the kitchen, we move on to the hand scraping and sorting. Have your staff hand scrape and sort the ware for the dish machine operator can be very helpful in streamlining. This will help the dish machine operator load more quickly and more efficiently. This can be accomplished by implementing what we refer to as the decoy method. The decoy method is stacking like wares on the dirty side of the table. For instance, stacking large plates with only large plates and only small plates with small plates. This will increase the dish machine operator's efficiency as well as lower potential for breakage. This can also be an area to make sure the ware is not accidentally being thrown in the trash. One more important factor to consider at this stage is to make sure your staff is not mixing dirty ware and clean ware. This is an area for dirty ware only. After your staff is done hand scraping and sorting, this is usually a good place to inspect good hand washing procedures. Even if your staff is wearing gloves, hand washing is one of the best ways to prevent the spread of foodborne illness and COVID-19. There are 5 steps to proper hand hygiene. Wet your hands with running water and apply soap. Lather the back of the hands in between the fingers and under the nails. Scrub for at least 20 seconds. Rinse the hands well, and then dry using either a clean single paper towel or using an air dryer. An alcohol-based sanitizer can be used when hand washing is unavailable, but remember, washing your hands is considered the most effective method for preventing the spread of germs. One of the reasons you'll want to get your staff to wash their hands after hand scraping and sorting is that by nature, this is typically a messy job. While taking off their gloves, it's very possible that they would come in contact with food, soil, or debris. The same is true for your flatware. Now, Dennis, would you share with us about pre-soaks and let us know how to use and what their main functions are?
Yeah, you got it, Larry. Thanks a lot. So the use of a pre-soak is an important factor in the cleaning and sanitizing of your ware. That's because its enzymatic properties help break down stubborn proteins and starches. Removal of food soil is critical to successful sanitization. As an added benefit, the result is sparkling ware and a more efficient dish machine operation because pre-soak helps to get your ware clean the first time through the dish machine. It really helps fight that tough situation where a customer finds hard to eliminate starches or proteins left on the ware at the dining table. It truly is a remarkable product. After your flatware is soaked in the pre-soak solution for about 20 minutes, it'll be ready to go through the dish machine. Loading racks properly is one of the most important things you can do to ensure efficiency in your operation. So make sure that your racks are fully loaded. It costs the same, about 50 cents per rack, amount of money to wash one item as it does many. But you also want to make sure that the rack is not overloaded or loaded improperly. Mixing large items and small items may cause what we call shielding. Like you can see in the upper right, mixing items can sometimes cause shielding. This is a situation in which a larger item prevents a smaller item from being properly contacted by water within the washer. The picture on the upper left, as you see, is an example of grouping like items to prevent shielding. So once you have your racks properly loaded, it is time to pre-scrap them. Pre-scrapping is the simple but important process of spraying the ware down with water with a pre-scrap hose, like most of you have in your operations. Making sure the ware is visibly clean on both the front and back is an important step in keeping debris out of your dish machine. This allows for a more sanitary wash process. So once you're done pre-scrapping, you are ready to wash. Obviously, the washing step is an important process, but it doesn't need to be overly complicated. One very basic rule to follow for good food safety and public health is this: let the machine complete the full cycle before pulling a rack out of the washer. Failure to do so could result in improper cleaning and/or sanitizing, as well as the possibility of residual dish detergent remaining on the ware, which can now be ingested, which is not a good thing. So everybody is probably aware that using a detergent is an important step to getting ware clean, but we may not always think about why. Almost all ware washing detergents are alkaline-based. This is important because organic food soils tend to be acidic. So if you remember, alkalis and acids help neutralize one another. This is why detergent is such an important chemical process in the sanitizing of ware in the dish machine, because getting things clean is the first step to help in sanitizing. So along with a good ware washing detergent, you will also want to pay attention to the following dish machine procedures to ensure good results on a daily basis. For setting up your dish machine, consider the following. Step 1, the machine must be clean to ensure proper wash pressure. Make sure drain stoppers, strainers, and wash arms are clean and in place. Step 2, check detergent, rinse agent, and sanitizer containers. Refill them if necessary. Step 3, fill the pre-soak bin and clear the area around the dish machine. Step 4, make sure the drain is closed and turn on the heater if you have one. Step 5, turn the machine on by pressing the on and off button. In most cases, the machine will fill automatically. Sometimes there is a manual fill and you might have to turn that handle. Step 6, once the machine is running, check for minimum water temperatures. Step 2 in the setup with your detergent, rinse, and sanitizer is often overlooked. And one critical factor that is often overlooked is the proper level of detergent. Not only is it key to make sure you have detergent in your dispenser or container, that's obvious, but that it's also set at the proper level. As discussed, the proper removal of food soil is one of the first steps in ensuring you properly sanitize your ware in the dish machine. Along these same lines, it is important that your detergent is made to work in the water conditions you have. If you have a high soil load and hard water, you would want to use a detergent that works well in these conditions, obviously. If you are unsure about the type of detergent you use or the proper setting and level of your detergent, please contact your dish machine chemical representative. Sometimes we get asked about the different types of dish machines that you may see, and there are some important factors to think about in regard to good public health and food safety. You're going to see a wide variety of dish machines in the industry. However, if you remember the basic parts and functions they all share, you won't need to feel lost or intimidated when you encounter a machine that you haven't seen before, and it happens to all of us. Instead, have a careful look inside the machine to identify the various basic systems and functionality that you will learn today. You'll then be able to make sure that your machine is clean, operational, and ready to sanitize your ware. So let's begin by looking at the two most critical distinctions for dish machines. One critical understanding for food safety and public health is how your dish machine sanitizes. There are two options for machine sanitizing: temperature or chemical. You should always follow the guidelines for both of these standards as outlined on the machine's data plate. This is an important factor in making sure you are following the best practices for food safety and public health. But for high temperature, sanitizing requires final rinse water at a minimum temperature of 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this is because the actual sanitizing happens from raising the ware surface temperature to 160 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, a requirement based on most local health codes. If you have a separate booster heater for your dish machine, you'll obviously want to make sure that the unit has been turned on prior to running your dish machine. And that's usually something that we see when we don't have temperatures making it to where they need to be is sometimes because the booster heater hasn't been turned on. The 180-degree minimum rinse water is not the only requirement. The flow pressure of the rinse water and the temperature in each of the machine's tanks must also meet the NSF specifications posted on the machine's data plate, because water pressure and tank temperature also influence the maximum wear surface temperature achieved. The next option is chemical sanitizing. Chemical sanitizing is usually accomplished by adding an EPA registered chlorine to the final rinse water at a concentration of 50 to 100 parts per million. But again, local health codes are the final authority, so please follow their recommendations for your area. The rinse water temperature is also required to be at a minimum of 120 degrees for chemical sanitizing and a maximum of 150. A good thing to remember is that although the minimum rinse temperature for chemical sanitizing is 120 degrees Fahrenheit, if you want to actually get the ware clean, you should strive for a minimum of 140 degrees wash temperature. The reason is because grease dissolves around 137 degrees. So getting your water temperature about 140 is ideal to handle the grease of high protein diets or just grease in general. So now that we've covered how the machine sanitizes, let's take a look at some of the most common types of dish machines you are likely to encounter. There are two types of dish machines based on tanks. They are a dump and fill, or what we call a batch machine, or a recirculating machine. A dump and fill or batch means that the entire amount of water is dumped after each wash cycle. A recirculating machine is a door-type conveyor or flight machine. These reuse the wash tank water, and rinse water comes from outside the dish machine, diluting the wash tank and displacing some of the soiled water. You might see any one of these four types of machines at your location. But for now, let's focus on the batch or dump and fill machine. So what do you say, Larry? You want to walk us through it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dennis. So this is the dump and fill machine. These machines are almost always low temp or chemical sanitizing machines. The dump and fill is a very simple machine. So if you're looking at your screen, you can see that basically it's a tank that you would slide the rack into, and it has wash arms, an upper wash arm and a lower wash arm. Those arms are fed the water and the detergent solution or rinse or sanitizer via the pump, which is fed by the motor. You'll also see that there's a pump intake screen and a scrap strainer screen, and we recommend cleaning those after every shift or every 2 hours. The sequence of the operation for the machine would be as follows. The wash. The wash pump circulates wash tank water with detergent through the arms over the ware. The wash step ends, the machine then drains and fills the machine with fresh water. There may be a quick flush of material from the machine as the machine fills with the fresh water. And then next, the rinse step starts. This is where water is sprayed through the arms over the ware with the rinse aid and the sanitizer. The cycle then ends and is ready to start again using that same rinse water as the wash water for the next rack. Now let's take a look at a recirculating door machine. The recirculating door machine is typically a machines that are high temp sanitizing machines. So instead of using sanitizer, they're going to use hot water to sanitize with. There are various components of this type of machine, and as you can see, it looks very familiar to the dump and fill machine. The big difference in this, if you will notice, there's two arms on the top and two arms on the bottom. The further arms away are the wash arms, and the closer arms to the rack are the rinse arms. This is where fresh water comes into the machine, rinses the dishes. That excess water falls into the wash tank and then allows dirty, greasy soils to skim off the top, and you've got fresh water that is coming to the machine that way. The sequence for operation for a recirculating machine is follows. You'll have the wash pump that circulates the wash tank water with the detergent through the wash arms over the wares. The wash step ends and the machine stops for a moment, usually 2 to 3 seconds, to let everything settle. Then the rinse step starts. This is where incoming house water is sprayed through the rinse arms over the ware with the rinse aid. Rinse water comes from the cycles collected in the tank as discussed, and the soiled water overflows down the drain. The next type of machine we're going to look at is a recirculating conveyor machine. This is a conveyor recirculating machine. The basic components are roughly the same, except for the fact that you push the rack in, and in this case, we're pushing the rack in on the left side of the machine, and it will exit on the right. So there's a conveyor arm that pulls the rack through the machine. But as you can see, a lot of the components are still the same. It's just a different configuration. There are curtains in the dish machine that need to be flexible and pliable to help with keeping temperature constant in the machine, as well as preventing the mixing of wash water and rinse water. You may need to replace them on a regular basis if they become hard or excessively worn. The rinse pressure is determined by the water pressure coming into the building, and typically the sweet spot for the rinse pressure is between 15 and 25 psi. And there will be a gauge on the dish machine that will show you what the rinse pressure is, and again, that should be between 15 and 25 psi. It is recommended that you drain and refill your recirculating door or conveyor machine about once every 2 hours when it's being used routinely. Once a rack comes out of your dish machine, it's important that we unload and allow the ware to dry properly. To help prevent the spread of COVID-19 and other foodborne illnesses, this is a great spot to ensure the wearing of vinyl gloves and hand washing before the handling of clean ware. You would not want the dish machine operator to put the dirty dishes in the machine to touch the clean ware without taking these precautions first. One very important product that can help with food safety concerns is a rinse additive. So if you look at the rinse additive, the features and benefits of rinse additives are they help ensure clean sanitary dishware to help secure a consistently positive guest experience. One-pass warewashing minimizes labor and utility costs while reducing environmental impact. Its rinse additive is actually used for low and high temp machines. A food safety consideration, though, allow for quick drying of wares to prevent putting ware away wet and causing what we call wet nesting. Wet nesting is a situation where ware is stacked and put away wet. In most localities, this is a food code violation because it can cause bacterial growth. Use a rinse aid to help with dry time, and it can help prevent this situation. After your rack has sufficient time to dry, it's time to put the wares away. Some considerations during this current coronavirus outbreak is preventing the polishing of ware. This could be a risk to the spread of coronavirus as well as other germs and bacteria. If your ware is not coming clean from your dish machine, consider adjusting one or more of the steps that we've talked about in the flow of the operation, or contact your service representative. For instance, if your ware is being bussed in a timely fashion, is your team properly hand scraping and sorting your dishes to help your dish machine operator? Is the dish machine operator pre-scraping the dishes with the spray hose to keep debris out of the dish machine? And are the racks being loaded correctly? It's a good idea to routinely inspect all of the areas of the flow of ware to make the proper procedures are being followed. In fact, the CDC recommends appointing one person to be the COVID-19 contact person on every shift. They can be the point person for all COVID-19 related concerns regarding the staff as well as policies. As you prepare to put away your clean ware, you should be placing it in an area that's clean, dry, and airy. It is also beneficial if it is away from the hand scraping and sorting area to prevent cross-contamination between clean and dirty ware. The last step of flow is silver sorting. Sorting your silver is critical, and you should conform with local health code department regulations. If the process is done incorrectly, it can lead to improper touching of the usable side of the ware, which can cause a food code violation. This is the general procedure for handling silverware. Once you take it out of the pre-soak, you must wash it once on an open, flat rack. Then you must sort the ware into like items, forks with forks, spoons with spoons, knives with knives, etc. And then you put them into a cylindrical flat ware holder with the handles down. This is so that when the ware is dry, it can easily then be loaded into storage receptacles with the handle facing you without ever touching the now clean ware. From here, it can be safely transported back to the customer's table or serving areas by the designated staff member who only handles the clean ware on the clean handle. Having the right tools and racks makes ensuring the proper best food safety practices are easy to execute. We sometimes get asked, what can you do to process your wares if you don't have a dish machine? Your 3-compartment sink can be used as a viable cleaning and sanitizing tool when set up correctly. Just be sure to follow the important steps. Step 1, pre-scrape and pre-soak. Step 2 is the wash. That's the first basin. Make sure the hot water is at least 110 degrees. Step 3 is the rinse, which would be the middle sink. And you wash the dishes and rinse the dishes in the second basin. Step 4, sanitize the rinsed items in the third basin sink using either hot water or, in most cases, a chemical solution. That could either be quaternary-based or chlorine-based sanitizer. Step 5 is to dry. The items must air dry on a clean drain board. And then 6, clean and sanitize the working equipment. Now let's take a look at some specific things you might want to consider if you've not used your dish machine in some time. We already saw this slide, but some of these steps will also be valuable as you look to reopen or turn your machine back on for use. If you've not used your dish machine for some time, enacting steps 1 and 2 is a great place to start. Make sure your machine is clean and free of debris. Make sure your dispensers or containers have chemical or product in them. If you're using a liquid chlorine sanitizer and it hasn't been used for some time, you may want to hook up a new bucket. After you've made sure the chemicals are in order, we'll continue with steps 4, 5, and 6. Make sure the drain's closed. Close the door on the machine, turn it on. Turn on the booster heater if there's one there. The machine should then fill with water. Make sure the water's turned on. You may have turned the water off to the building. And as the machine fills, look to see how the gauges react. Are they moving up? Is the heat working? If any of these steps do not seem to be working, you may want to contact your dish machine representative. If you have hard water and have not delimed your dish machine in some time, now would be a great opportunity to do so. It is always recommended that you use a delimer in accordance with the packaging label. And once again, contact your dish machine representative if you have any questions about how to safely use this product. Now, we know we went over a lot of material today, but we want you to know that Ecolab's always here to help. Ecolab's been working to provide you with many resources. And Dennis, if you would you share with us a few of those resources that are available for our friends now?
You got it. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, just visit ecolab.com for food safety and public health webinars, as well as to visit our food safety resource library. And don't forget, your Ecolab representative is ready to provide and address any additional requests for service and support as your operations resume. We've also been working on resources regarding the coronavirus. You can find them all by visiting ecolab.com/coronavirus. You can see that in the upper right, ecolab.com/coronavirus, and clicking on your specific market. We have everything from reopening checklists to task-specific step-by-step procedures. And as we're nearing our time together, we wanted to leave a few minutes to capture any questions you might have. So please feel free to type them in and we'll take a look and see what we have.
Thank you so much, Dennis and Larry. This was really amazing information as everyone is kind of getting back up and running. We do have a few questions, and I will go just kind of run down some of them that have come in. What is the proper procedure for testing a low temp automatic dish machine with a chemical sanitizer?
I don't think there's anybody. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that this is kind of something that you really enjoy doing. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a low temp or a chemical sanitizing dish machine, the proper way to check is obviously with the test paper or test tab. Now, I do recommend reading the instructions on the side of the container because they do vary slightly. But if you're using the test paper, which is what most health departments utilize in the United States, you actually take the paper, you can touch it on a dish or you can touch it on the rack. They don't recommend dipping it into the water itself, but after a dish is finished washing and you raise the door, you can touch it on a wet surface in the machine, on the plate itself, or on the rack itself, and then you immediately check it versus the color on the side of the test strip. And again, you want to be between 50 and 100 parts per million. And I know our friends to the north in Canada, they typically have to be 100 parts plus.
Yeah, so follow regular code. And then just like Larry was saying, the tabs are slightly different. What we find is people tend not to read the directions on the side of the container. And that's something that we train our associates to abide by.
Great. We also have a few Ecolab experts on the line as well who are going to answer some of the COVID-19 questions that have come in. This one is quat sanitizer at 200 to 400 parts per million sufficient during this COVID-19 period?
Hi there, Ashley and Dennis and Larry, thank you for that great information. This is Ruth Petran. I'm the technical leader for the scientific aspects related to COVID-19, among other topics for Ecolab, and I'm happy to join you. I assume this question means using that sanitizer in a warewash operation, but hard to say for sure here. I think it depends on where this is being used. The guidance from FDA related to cleaning and sanitizing and so on of restaurant areas is to continue to follow the established food safety protocols and best practices. And this includes wash, rinsing, and sanitizing all food contact surfaces, including wares, obviously, things like tabletops and other surfaces. So continuing to use that 200 to 400, sanitizing levels are what FDA is recommending. I do think it's important to consider this from a risk standpoint, though. And if there's a situation where the risk of potential contamination from the virus that causes COVID-19 is a possibility, then you may want to use higher levels of chemistry at a disinfectant level. And the EPA has provided a list of those approved disinfectants. But again, under routine circumstances, consistent with FDA recommendations, just routine wash, rinsing, and sanitizing is what's recommended.
Great. Next question. If there are virus droplets on a plate and the plate is pre-rinsed with a sprayer nozzle, can the virus become airborne and infect the person washing the dishes?
Yeah, I'll start with that one again. I think it gets back to thinking about the risks of transmission and all of the practices that any establishment needs to be putting in place at this point to help manage those risks. And one really important one of those is considering management of ill people. Obviously, employees, and not permitting people who are sick with COVID-like symptoms to be in a facility. but also making it clear to patrons and guests who might be entering those food service establishments that is not what they are supposed to be doing. And certainly that's in line with guidance from the medical community and public health authorities like the CDC. So with that as a backdrop, I would say the likelihood of there being virus droplets on a plate is extremely low, assuming all of this is in place. However, if, to the meat of the question, if there are droplets on a plate, there can be a potential for aerosolization, potentially to be breathed in by the person who's spraying those dishes off. But, the other thing to keep in mind is the likelihood is really low, and many establishments are asking their employees to be wearing face coverings and barrier masks, and or face shields in some cases. Those kinds of personal protective equipment can help with potential situations like this, but they really are primarily designed to protect the wearer from spreading COVID droplets from themselves to others. The data on does it protect droplets coming at them is not as black and white as we would like, but it's suggested that there may be some protection there. So I'm sorry, a really long answer to this question. There has been no indication of recommendations from public health authorities, including the FDA, again, under routine circumstances and assuming all these other practices are in place, that behaviors and programs and procedures like this would pose any greater risk with those caveats in place.
Great. Just a couple other COVID questions, and then we have a few that are a little bit more specific to warewashing. So Ruth, while we have you, how often do you need to change gloves during cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting?
Well, I'm going to go back to my favorite response of it really depends. And what the wearer of those gloves is doing. If it's a very consistent kind of job they are performing that is wiping off of tables, for example, or staying focused on warewashing, for example, continuing with the same task, basically. The recommendation would be to change those gloves when they become visibly soiled. And that very much depends on what the kind of task is. If there's instances where people wearing gloves are touching their face, for example, which they shouldn't be doing, but if that happens, that would be another reason for changing gloves. Certainly if they become damaged or torn, et cetera, they would want to consider changing gloves as well.
Great, thank you. How long does the potency of sanitizer last before it starts to lose strength?
I can jump in on that, or Ruth, you may help as well, but typically what we see, and I assume you're referring to a chlorine sanitizer. A chlorine sanitizer on a dish machine, in all honesty, starts losing its potency fairly quickly. There's a lot of factors that come into play, sunlight being one of them, and it will, for lack of a better term, kill off the potency on the sanitizer. So that's why we're saying if you've been out of your restaurant for a couple of months now, it's highly recommended you change out that sanitizer because it does lose its potency over time. Now, you won't so much see that, obviously, with the detergent or the rinse, but you will definitely see it with your dish machine chlorine sanitizer.
Great, thank you.
I don't have anything to add. Like I said, it depends on the sanitizer.
Okay. If in regular warewashing is fine, then why are nursing home surveyors insisting on disposable dishes and wares?
It's a risk management decision that, certain locales and certain management groups, et cetera, are choosing to implement. Within that, nursing home environment and we have seen cases of COVID-19 be transmitted, fairly effectively through congregated living like this, especially among people who may be more immunocompromised, just due to the reality of their health conditions. The likelihood of transmission still is low in that kind of environment, but given that there may be a higher disease burden and more susceptible people, that's just a more conservative way to manage those risks.
Perfect. A few more questions here while we have a little bit more time. In washing flatware, are they run through twice, once flat and second in containers with the handles down?
Yes. Yep. That is exactly the process. So just to be clear, yes, they go through the machine once on a flat rack, then they are sorted into their cylindrical containers with the handles down and washed again. Anything you want to add, Larry?
Nope, that's it. Just make sure when we say handles down, we're referring to the eating end up, or the business end is up the second time it goes through the machine, so that when it comes out for the second time, you take that cylinder, hold another empty cylinder, and dump the silverware into the cylinder that's empty, so that now the handles are up and the business end, or the eating end, is in the cylindrical rack, so that when employees touch, they will actually just be touching the handle, not the eating end of the utensil.
Perfect. How do you delime your Conveyor high temp dish machine?
Go ahead, Larry.
So deliming the dish machine and a Conveyor machine, typically we would ask that you close the drain first, then add your solution, your product, to the tank. So for instance, we may put 1 gallon of product in the machine after the drain is closed. Once you add the 1 gallon into the tank, close the machine up, turn the machine on so that the machine will fill to the proper water level. Now you want to put the solution in first, because if you allow the machine to fill with water first and you add the delime solution after it's filled, a fair amount of it's going to go down the drain because it'll just skim right off the top. So that's why I say put the solution in first, then turn the machine on, allow it to fill the rest of the way with water. Then you would turn on your machine, and typically, for instance, our machines on the Conveyor have a toggle on the back right hand of the machine, and again, it would depend on your machine. But we have a delime feature so that you turn that switch on and the machine will sit there and run constantly. And you allow that solution to run from anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. Then drain the machine down. I recommend filling it up with fresh water and turning the delime feature on again and allowing it to rinse out, and let that water go down the drain. And now you're going to refill the machine, and now you should be ready for use.
Yeah, one important safety measure that you need to take when you're doing this is to make sure that you put up some signs, that you block off the machine so that people know that it's deliming. Because one of the problems is that people will still try to go run a rack, they'll still try to clean the machine because they think the machine is just running in its normal routine operation. And obviously you do not want wares to go out that have delimer in them, which is an acid and could possibly be ingested. So just be careful that when you do delime your machine, that you're letting put up a sign. I would recommend that do not use the machine. It is deliming or something to that effect. Let the people know, your staff, that they cannot use the dish machine until, like Larry said, until you've delimed it, you've filled it up again, you've rinsed it, and then you filled it up again, and now the machine is ready for use.
And obviously wear personal protective equipment.
Good call out.
Definitely. We have one quick clarification question on the flatware. After washing and completing the process of placing it in the cylinders, is it supposed to air dry, or can you dry the silverware with a towel?
No, the ware should definitely air dry. The whole purpose of using the rinse additive is to help with that drying. We do not want to use any additional hand drying, if you will. The recommendation, if you're drying by hand, is you have to use an individual towel per piece of wear. And if you think about that, there could be 30 forks in one cylinder. So that's 30 towels, because you're supposed to use one per utensil. That's not very effective or efficient in any way, form, or fashion. So it's best just to allow it to air dry.
Thank you. Which method is recommended to be used to check and confirm the surface temperature of flatware reached at 160 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yep. So what most health departments will use is there is a tab that they will place on the dish machine, and they will run it through a cycle. And what they will do is they will look through the end of the cycle to see if the wear. What the tab does, it's actually like a small, I don't know the science behind it. I'm sure there might be people on it that know a little bit more about the exact science behind it. But what it does is the tab, once it's attached to the dish machine, will turn black when it reaches the appropriate temperature. So this is typically what the health department will use to verify that the surface wear is reaching the proper temperature. Now, they're going to look at certain benchmarks, such as what is your wash temperature, and that's why we said you need to look at your gauges. You need to look at your wash temperature, you need to look at your rinse temperature, and they are going to look at those things to make sure. But in the final analysis, they're going to look at that little marker on the wear to see if it is reaching the proper temperature. And you can buy these same things. I know our associates sell these as a regular item to our customers. They are purchasable. So that you can basically replicate what the health department is doing to make sure that your wear is getting up to 160 degrees. Anything else you would add, Larry?
Nope, you're spot on. The biggest thing is make sure that the 180 degrees is coming in, and then the actual wear surface temperature is 160. That's why we have to have 180 coming in, because by the time it gets in the machine, through the rinse jets and sprays onto the wear, it has to be at 160 degrees hitting the wear.
Perfect. Okay, I think we have time for two more questions. We have a couple questions about sanitizing. When increasing the sanitizer dilution in the 3-comp sink to cover disinfectant, how long should it remain on surface to kill, and must you rinse after kill time?
So using a third sink quaternary sanitizer, the Ecolab product is recommended to be in solution for a minimum of 60 seconds. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people that just dip it in the solution and set it out to air dry. But the recommendation is for it to be in solution for a minimum of 60 seconds. Then it's pulled from the solution and is to be air dried. So you want to put it in a nice airy area. Typically the in clean table, you can set it on that and allow it to air dry.
Perfect.
If I could add one thing, I think the question also asked about disinfecting. So if this was done at a higher concentration, following the label directions is key on the appropriate contact time that's required. And presumably this would be of a food contact surface, because we're talking a wear here. So absolutely, it would have to be rinsed with potable water, and then it would have to be sanitized in order to make darn sure there's not any residue of that higher level of chemistry, which would be at the disinfectant level, remaining on the wear. So if there's a disinfection step incorporated on a food contact surface, following that, you need to rinse and then go through a normal sanitizing.
Thanks for the clarification, Doc. Appreciate it.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Okay, and our last question is another sanitizing question. Could you please clarify or just explain a little bit more the sanitizer range of 50 to 100 parts per million when most bleach manufacturer instructions say to use 200 parts per million for sanitizing food contact surfaces, and quat manufacturers say to use between 150 and 400?
Is Nick, I don't know if Nick Pop is on. I don't know if Nick can answer that. I do not have an answer for that.
You know, this is Ruth. At least comparing clots to chlorine, yeah, they will have different concentrations based on how they act. So following the labeled directions for the particular use of those products is really key. There's a lot of information on the labels, and it goes beyond just the base concentrations, but also the use of that product and how that particular sanitizer is being applied, the method of application as well.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of those question and answers to all of our attendees and to all of our experts. I'll pass it back to Larry and Dennis to kind of finish out.
Yeah, that's great. So we just wanted to thank you for your questions. We appreciate your engagement and feedback today. So please join us on the next slide. Please join us September 17th for our next installment of Food Safety 101 webinars in our Food Safety 101 webinar series, in which we'll dive deeper into health inspections, what to expect, how to prepare, and how they strengthen your food safety program. So please set your calendar for September 17th. Watch your inbox for webinar details later this summer. So you should be coming out shortly. It has been our pleasure to speak with all of you today, and we hope you found this time beneficial. Please let us know how we may support you now and in the future. And just some final housekeeping items. A recording of this presentation will be available for on-demand viewing on ecolab.com next week. And to receive the continuing education certificate, please complete the survey following today's webinar. That's all we had, and we just want to say thank you once again, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today, and be safe.
Thank you very much for attending.